guys, and welcome back to the Motor Recon podcast. I'm your host, Adam. I'm joined again today by Rob. What we're going to be doing today is a little topic called Spicy or Not Spicy. So, where we're going to take a look at some of the lower-end cars and say, is it worth just stretching that little bit more to perhaps get a higher model? So, the first one we're going to kick off with is the new BMW 1 Series. Now, I know this is a contentious car for both of us, really.
Yeah.
Because from what we can see is the new 1 Series has taken away a lot of that magic from the old one. So now all the cars are front-wheel drive from the base models up, not rear-wheel drive like they were in the old one. But the M135 now is all-wheel drive, not rear-wheel drive as well. So do you think it's exciting enough to stretch to that car, or should you just get the front-wheel drive lower M performance models, for example?
I wouldn't buy one, personally. And if I'm being honest, if it was my money, I probably wouldn't even be buying the lower end models. I have my reasons for that as well. I think you're right. The trouble with the sort of M135i is all the things that made the outgoing model unique, such as its rear wheel drive, that lovely sort of 6-cylinder engine up front as well, they're all gone. And he's now basically in direct competition with other hot hatchers who I would argue do the 4-wheel drive sort of 4-pot turbo engines better.
Yeah, but just for the sake of this comparison, if you for whatever reason you said, right, I've got my money, I can afford obviously the top model, the M135.
Yeah.
I'm going into that showroom. Do you stretch to it, or do you just get a lower model?
I just get a lower model personally.
Because I think I would be the same. Now, the reason I would go with this one, just for the example, is like you said, that being 4-wheel drive, not front-wheel drive, in some ways to me makes it a little bit less exciting, if anything. Because some of the front-wheel drive hot hatches, like I said, some we'll come on to later, they can be extraordinarily fun to drive.
No, it's true.
As can 4-wheel drive ones, to be fair. But with this one, I think it was exciting to have that little bit more of a looser thing, which in a hot hatch I think is important. Power-wise and things like that, the M135 is now doing 306-ish horsepower, which, again, it seems slightly down on what the old one was doing, which was closer to 340. So it's actually lost power. I know it's a 4-cylinder now, not a 6-cylinder. Whereas you can get a normal, like the 2-litre ones with that 240-ish brake horsepower. So
still plenty. You're not losing
that far down.
No, you're not losing that much.
And again, you can get X-Drive on the lower models as well, should you want to. So you could still save yourself a bit of money there.
Credit to them, the big step up that they have made between the old 1 Series and the new one is on the interior though. We've discussed this before, and I think if you can get a lower model with a nice interior that is up to spec with the M135i, I would just go with that, to be honest.
I think I'd be inclined to agree with you as well. And some of the M135 is starting at 36 grand, whereas some of the other models you can get it from like 27, 28 grand. So it's a decent chunk of money.
Yeah, it's not an insignificant amount to save. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I'd be on your boat there. I'd be getting this sort of lower down end performance model with a few maybe extras on it.
Yeah.
Rather than chipping out all the way for.
I don't, because as you say, that unique panache that the old one had that made it something I wanted to buy isn't really there anymore.
And now they're both 4-cylinder engines on the higher model's still a 4-cylinder, whereas on the old one it was a 6-pot, like you say. So.
And like you
it's
say,
not any different. You could just put the sports exhaust on it and it might sound similar.
And the problem is, as we're going to be coming on to very soon, it brings it directly into competition with a company that does it far better.
Yeah, but we'll come on to that one in a bit. So the next one, this one obviously we have talked about this a lot, so I do apologise for the listeners here, but it is the Fiesta. Now with the new Mark 8 ones coming out, obviously you've got you can now get ST line ones with a standard 140 brake horsepower. You can pick them up for like £22,000 should you wish, or do you stretch for £26,000 and get an ST?
For me, I would stretch. Actually, I own an ST line actually of the Mark 7 generation, and I think as nice as it is to drive, I think when you look at the price difference between where the ST line gets off and the full bore ST gets on, I think it's worth the extra cash actually.
Yeah, now with this one you are getting, now the standard ST comes with 200 brake horsepower out the box, which is nothing to sniff at in a car that small, whereas obviously 140 for the 1 litre EcoBoost now compared to a 125, which you can get as well. But say 0 to 60 is actually not that different. So the ST it does it in just over 6 seconds, whereas the normal ST line you're talking more like 8 seconds. It's not
too bad.
It's not big of a difference. But where the ST comes in, it's got completely different suspension. for the handling, which is important in a hot hatch. I think the handling wise, that's where the big difference is. And when I had my old ST, I came from the equivalent of what an ST line is now, and the handling was completely different. It drove completely differently, and I think that is an important thing to take into consideration.
I would also add as well the engine. I mean, it's not like it's just a tuned up version of the old of the standard ST line 3-pot. It is a proper, entirely different engine specifically for the full bore ST.
Yeah, now they are both 3 cylinders, but the ST one's 1.5 litres rather than the 1 litre.
Yeah.
But again, like I say, it's got cylinder deactivation, so it can be as economical as the normal 1 litre should you want it to be. It has that 6th gear, which I think is very important in a car.
To be fair, I think the new ST line now does have a 6th.
It does, sorry, I do apologise, yeah. But that, again, because if you drop it down to 2 cylinders in 6th gear, it probably will help massively for your economy. On your drive. So
I think with all of those things taken into consideration and the fact that you can't get the 1.5 litre 3-cylinder engine in the ST line, I think it's worth the investment actually.
And you do get the Recaro seats, which again on the 1 Series, like you say, the standard seats in the M135 are very similar to the normal seats you get in the other cars. So again, it's not that much of a difference inside, whereas the ST, it is a little bit. So for me, I think it probably is worth a little bit more money.
Agreed. Yeah, I would say that.
Just to do that. And I would personally stretch. And hopefully next year I will be. So we'll do that. Next in the line. Now this is one, we're not going to start at the base one on this. This is the VW Golf GTI or the Golf R.
This is tough. And this, actually, the Golf R is the one that I say that with BMW changing the architecture of the M135i, you're bringing it directly into the firing lines of the Golf R.
Yeah, both 300 horsepower-ish.
Both four-wheel drive.
As well, yeah, both four-wheel drive. To be honest, that probably is the market they're competing against, but you can get the Golf R for a little bit cheaper. But the GTI, obviously, it's been a staple of hot hatches for, well, what is it?
It's the daddy.
No, 1975, wasn't it? Yeah, the original one came out in 1975, so it's been widely regarded as one of the best, if not the best, in some people's eyes, hot hatches from day one, really.
Yeah.
Few in between that weren't so great, but the Golf R started a while ago with the R32. It's now just dropped that and it's now called just the R. But for me, is it worth it? Because you can get 235 horsepower in a Golf GTI now.
That's not bad.
Rather than 300 in your R. So it's not that much more. 70 horsepower, and it's a lot. But with four-wheel drive, I think you can still get a manual in the Golf R, which I think is important in this one because the Golf GTI is said you should get it with the manual.
Yeah, I find this one really tough because although they are based on the same architecture, they do offer a significant difference between the two for you to maybe consider buying the more expensive one.
Yeah, you do get a couple of extra little things, like you say, you get a different body kit on it, which personally I don't think looks as nice. I prefer the sort of subtler styling of the GTI, and I like the sort of the red lines and like little blue lines you get on them like they do on the GTE and GTI.
I don't think either of them look that spectacular from the outside, to be honest.
That's the point.
It is, yeah, and I get that. They go for an understated styling and they go for that slip below the radar type of affair. But so styling wise, I wouldn't. That's not the reason I would be choosing sort of between these because I think styling wise they're relatively similar.
Yeah, they are very, very similar, aren't they?
Yeah.
No, I would agree with you on that one. I think if it was my money and I was going in to buy one, I think just the GTI name pulls me in more, but for probably more of a historical reason. Whereas the R, I think since the last generation of the R32, probably wouldn't pull me in just as much. Because it's a similar engine, it's still a 2-litre 4-pot. It's just slightly more modified to make it 300 horsepower rather than 240-ish.
And I think it comes down to whether you want the four-wheel drive or not and whether that makes enough of a difference for you. I would probably go for the GTI purely because I do think that the power that it puts out is enough. Styling-wise, like I've mentioned, they're relatively similar to each other. And again, the heritage of the GTI name does draw me in.
Yeah, I think if I was looking at sort of Golf R money, I'd probably, even though they are technically the same car, I'd just get the Audi S3.
Yeah, I can see your logic on that because when you're spending that much on a Golf, you are moving into the territory of why if badge is something that you are interested in, you would be thinking, well, I'm now into the realms of sort of.
Well, it's the same car, but I think it has a better interior on the Audi. I think it looks slightly better.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
As well. And so I think if I was going in that market, I think I'd probably get an S3. But out of the two between the R and the GTI, I think I'd have to get the GTI. I don't think it's worth the stretch to the R.
Yeah,
Personally,
and as I
obviously.
say, history as well for me plays a big part in this, and I would like to be a part of sort of the GTR heritage. So yeah, I would go with
I
that.
think get more respect as well if you had the
Yeah,
GTI.
yeah, people look at it a little bit more. They covet them maybe a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe if you let us know in the comments.
Yeah, I think what you prefer. Now the next one, this one probably is a bit of a contagion one. It's a similar sort of thing down the barrel, but with the new A class, and they did it with the old fair. You've got two choices now of the A sporty model. So you've got the A35 or the A45. I know you have the S, but we could discount the S in this particular one. It's just the A35 or the A45. Now they look exactly the same, to be honest.
They have a
Pretty
different
much.
grill, to be
Yeah,
fair,
but it's pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah.
Interior is, again, pretty much exactly the same. It's the same engine, just more modified in the A45. And there is a new version of that coming with 400 horsepower as opposed to the 300 in the A35.
good God,
Which
that swings it back.
that could swing it. However, the A35 you're looking at 35 grand starting price, whereas the A45 you're talking 45 grand.
So there is a 10 grand wedge in there.
I know. That's the kicker. Is it worth it for 10 grand more for what is essentially the same car with a little bit more power?
I mean, that's the trouble you're running into. Look, the A45, I agree, it's a great feat of engineering. Having a hot hatch, it's basically pioneered the super hatch category.
Yeah, it did.
Where it is now, you're up there in power, where you're knocking on sports cars sort of territory. But could I stomach spending £45,000 on an A-Class?
No.
I couldn't do it.
No. Again, if you're just going to do that, you may as well have an RS3.
It's a tough one, isn't it? And as you say, I like the A35 sufficiently enough that I don't think I would want more than that, actually.
No, it's perfectly quick. What, you're going to 300 horsepower and a hot hatch is enough.
It is more than enough, I think.
Yeah.
For me, the A30, and again, there isn't much difference in the styling, and I can't get over spending 45 grand on an A-Class.
That's starting as well. So
It's an astonishing amount of money.
I think for me, again, on that front, I'd save myself 10 grand and probably use that for insurance and fuel for the year.
Sure, yeah,
If
take
you
it on.
had, this is again, if you had the money for both,
Yeah.
I'd save myself the 10 grand and just.
Yeah, sure. I would agree with that. Yeah, I think that's where I'd be going.
And to be fair, I do actually prefer the grille on the A35.
A little bit classier, I think.
Yeah,
but,
a little bit more, so a little bit classier. I'd prefer that myself. Now, next one. This is probably the one that's for us the easiest decision, but I think for some people might be a bit difficult. So again, this is the scenario you've got the money to buy both, so the money isn't really coming into it in some instances. But the base model 911 Carrera or the 911 Turbo S, which has just come out for those guys who don't know, it's just launched in the UK.
Yeah.
Now, big difference in this. One is £82,000, one is £155,000, but we're assuming you can afford both. One is 385 brake horsepower, one is 650 horsepower.
There is a huge difference.
Is a huge difference. 1 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, one 2.7 seconds.
Huge.
Yeah,
It is. I think it is quite big.
And
yeah.
182 miles an hour or 205 miles an hour. That doesn't sound as much, but you need, the faster you go, the more power you need to get that extra.
And I also think
speed.
as well, at the end of the day, with these cars that are largely road focused as well, top speed for me doesn't really bother me. Not that much.
No, you can't use it on the road unless you're in Germany and you're on the autobahn.
But again,
you can't really use it.
To top over 185 mile an hour, even on the autobahn, is probably quite a feat. It is a public road after all.
Yeah. So with these ones, some of the other models, you could argue that sound might come into it a little bit. In this one, probably not as much. They both sound horrific. I've heard them both now, and I don't like either. They're very, very dull on the new 911s compared to the older ones.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning as well, both of them are force-fed, so both of them are turbocharged. Granted, the power difference is enormous. I know looks are subjective, and everybody is their own.
The one thing I'll say, we will have a little picture of the stats up on the screen, or have had it at the minute, depending where I put it, but the turbo, when you look at it from the back only, it's got a little spoiler on compared to the standard car. And from the back, it looks horrific. It does not suit the car at all from the back. From the side, it looks alright because the angle they've got it at, but from back on, it is not nice.
For me, we've discussed this on the podcast several times now, and obviously, if you've been listening for a while, you know that my preference on styling is a clean aesthetic. So I will always gravitate towards your standard Carrera because of that. I like the clean lines.
To be fair, with the 911, unless you go to the GT3s and the like RSs and stuff like that, even the turbo, it's relatively clean.
Yeah.
It's got side scoops in on the side and, like you say, the rear wing, but they're not shouty. It's not like a McLaren or Ferrari, for an example, where it is just sort of wings and scoops and stuff.
I think for me, if I could afford both, I like the Carrera because it's all the car I could ever want for me personally. I drop in that 7-speed manual gearbox, and again, it's quite a subtle styling. I think it's quite classy, and for me, that's my preference.
Well, with these, because like I say, they're both the same engine, they both sound very similar and fairly dull. From inside, it's exactly the same interior. It is exactly the same. Depending on how you spec each one with colours and whatever, it will look the same. I personally probably would again go for the Carrera, even if I could afford both, just on the basis that you can't use the power in the real world. It's not possible. I've seen a lot of people reviewing the new Turbo S, and most of the conclusions come out that it is just good. It's not like amazing, it's just a good car.
I think though, this one in particular really comes down to how much does power mean to you.
Yeah.
If it means a lot, then it's a no-brainer.
It also depends where you live. In the UK, you couldn't use a 600... Well, you could drive it, obviously, but there's nowhere you can use a 200 mile an hour, 650 horsepower car. Really.
But some people would like it for bragging rights.
Yeah.
Whether they use it or not.
That's what it would come down to.
So if power really does mean that much to you, and if track days is something that obviously appeals to you as well, then yeah, I can fully understand why you would go for the Turbo S.
Yeah, to be fair, I think on a track day, it'd be more balanced, I think, going for the normal one.
I like the Carrera because, and I know it's not pure, quote unquote, because it's not an air-cooled engine. And sure, yes, all of them are turbocharged now, but I think it's purer than the turbo.
I would agree, and you can get it with a manual.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think, again, that would come down to personal preference. I personally would prefer a manual. Some people I know don't.
Yeah.
So, we'll just... On that one, again, let us know in the comments what you pick out of those two. But for the final one, this one is, I think, the most interesting for me personally, because it's going into the era of sort of your more future cars now. So this is the electric era. So Tesla Model 3 we're going to look at, specifically the long range and the performance models.
I have tossed around with this idea a lot between these two, because I think it's a fascinating argument to be made for both sides of the fence on these.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, range is probably an important thing for electric cars for a lot of people, depending on what you do. For us personally, it might not be that big of a deal unless we do one long trip every now and then.
But that being said, I don't know though, because this is the thing about electric cars. We mentioned this when we did an electric episode a little while back, and what you realise is, even if range isn't a huge thing for you, you've got to understand, say for example you have a petrol car that has a relatively small range, it doesn't matter. Filling it up takes a couple of minutes, and there are petrol stations all across the country if you live in the UK. With an electric car, that's not the same. So for that one long distance drive you do, maybe you go down to Devon or Cornwall on holiday or whatever, it might count. As in, it could really count.
Yeah. Well, just to give you a few of the numbers. So the long range one, it has a theoretical max range of 348 miles, which is a long way. That would get you to Devon on one charge.
Sure, yeah.
Top speed of 145. Again, you can't really use it here, but it's there. And 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds. That's still quicker than pretty much any hot hatch or
it's cracking.
Normal car you're going to buy. And it's £46,990.
Okay.
So the performance edition, well, the performance model, should I say, that one starts at 56,000. So you're already getting your 10 grand more there. But again, the range is 329 miles.
So it's not an insignificant amount less.
It's only 20 miles difference.
But I personally feel though, yeah, you say that's only 20 miles difference. The odds of you getting the actually claimed range in the real world might not be achievable.
No, it depends how you drive and obviously traffic conditions, things like that. But a top speed of 162, so again it would come down to bragging rights if you prefer that. And 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. So you're saving 1.2 seconds 0 to 60, which again would only matter at the traffic lights, because once you get there, you're pretty much going to have to stop anyway.
And although it is only 20 miles, for example, I think that in an electric car, every mile actually does count. And I think that 20 miles could make all the difference in the world, from you being stranded somewhere to you getting to a supercharger.
Yeah.
And for me, I would have the mileage over the extra performance, because range anxiety is more prevalent to me than that extra performance boost that, let's be real, in the real world, you can't make the most of.
Yeah. I say for me personally, in this scenario, if I was thinking this as myself, I would go for the performance one.
Okay.
Not because I think, like you say, the range isn't important, but for the sake of 20 miles, I only ever do 1, maybe 2 long distance journeys a year, and I'm willing to sacrifice that and plan ahead slightly.
Okay.
For the sake of this, because I would stop on a service station anyway for some lunch.
Oh, it's true, yeah.
Like, so I'd probably just top it up there, and that would get me to where I was going. Just because I'm a bit of a child, I do quite like the idea of doing 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds in a family car, and I know I'll never be able to use the top speed unless I go to, say, Germany or something, or on a runway, for example. I don't know. I think I would do it.
For me, it's more a case of I don't care about the performance more than the additional range. Because again, for me, I would say there are 2 big hurdles for me for the electric cars. One is cost, the other is range, to be honest. And the standard long-range Tesla Model 3 has enough performance for me that I would rather take the range and keep my 10 grand.
Yeah.
That's a personal preference, though.
I would say the same. I mean, in the real world, I'd probably just buy the standard range, if it was personally.
Yeah.
But
if you're choosing between the two,
between these, I think I would stretch for the performance just for the bit of fun, because the cars are dull. I can't deny the fact, like, they don't have any sound. They just don't look exciting. There's nothing. The interior is probably a Marmite thing. I like the big screen in the middle, but I still would prefer at least a speedometer in front of my face.
It's true, isn't it? I think some switch gear, I think.
Yeah, I think something would be nice. But I think just to make it a little bit more exciting from what it is, I'd have to just get the performance one.
Yeah.
Just that would be my reason for it, just to make it somewhat exciting from what is a very dull car, in my opinion.
And the thing is as well, obviously, that is from today, as of today, that is my choice. Obviously, with the charging infrastructure forever improving, in 2 years' time, that might not be the same opinion that I hold, because that range anxiety I once had might have come down significantly. One of the other things that we haven't really talked about in this at all, which isn't a huge factor in the Tesla choice, if you like, is fuel economy.
Yeah.
Although the performance is a lot faster, it's not using any more fuel as such, as in it's not a noticeable difference between the fuel.
No, and I say that's, again, right, we'll probably come into it. Like, say, if you buy an M135, for example, over, say, a 120 diesel, the fuel economy is actually quite a significant difference.
The cost in that will be rather significant.
That will hit you in the pocket, whereas if you're just doing it on an electric car,
it's not as bad.
You don't notice it really. It might be a couple of pence.
It's not as significant, is it?
Yeah, no. Well, I think, so that's probably quite an interesting topic for me, actually. I never really thought about it like that, but if I was doing it, I would get the performance, just for that.
Yeah.
So I think that'd probably be a good place to wrap us up there. I think that's a nice way to end. So what we'll do is say, anyone who's got any topics, let us know in the comments below, or send us a message, anything like that, and we will do that for you. Again, like, subscribe, do everything like that, and we'll see you next week for another episode.
Yeah. See you in a bit.
Later.